Hi guys, welcome to yet another episode of GrammatiX. Today we'll be doing the continuation of the sentence. In the previous class we studied sentence and the classification of sentence according to its function, and this class we'll be doing classification of sentence according to the structure. So before moving on to the kinds, we need to know two important factors, that is a phrase and a clause. What is a phrase and what is a clause? Now, phrase are a group of words. A phrase, what do you mean by phrase? A group of words which doesn't give you complete sense, but little bit sense it makes. Such a group of words is called a phrase. For example, you can write on the tree. So this is a phrase, a group of words which has little bit sense and doesn't make complete sense. So that type of group of words are called a phrase. Now what is a clause? Clause is again a group of words which gives you some sense but not a complete sense, a complete meaning. But the important thing that a clause has a subject and a verb. So these three things are there in a clause. Both phrase and clause are a group of words which conveys some meaning but doesn't have that complete sense. The only difference is phrase doesn't have a subject and a verb, but a clause has a subject and a verb. So that's the definition of a phrase and a clause. And once again, the clause is divided into two. The first one is the main clause and the second is the subordinate clause. To understand the structure of a sentence, you need to know what is the main clause and what is the subordinate clause. Another name for the main clause is independent clause. The name itself gives you the definition. Independent clause and subordinate is dependent clause. So the name itself gives you the definition of what are independent clause and the dependent clause. Now what do you mean by independent clause? Independent clause is again a group of words that has a subject and a verb and can stand of its own. It has a meaning of its own. That is what you mean by a independent clause. And what is a dependent clause? A dependent clause again will be having a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand alone. It has to depend on this main clause to get a meaning. Such type of clause is called dependent clause. So independent clause and dependent clause. Now, so again the sentence, you have the phrase and clause. Phrase, a group of words which gives you some sense but not complete sense or complete meaning. Clause, same definition as a phrase, but the main part in a clause is that is the subject and a verb. The clause again is divided into two, the main clause or the independent clause and subordinate clause or the dependent clause. Now main clause is that part of the sentence which can stand alone and it conveys meaning. That is the main clause. And dependent, it has to depend on the main clause to get a meaning. So we'll be giving an example. She went for a walk although it was raining. Now here you can see she went for a walk. It can stand alone. So it is a main clause. Although it was raining, it has a meaning, but it has to depend on this to get the complete meaning. So this is the dependent clause and this is the independent clause. So again, a clause, main clause, that is independent clause, subordinate clause, that is a dependent clause, So this is an example for it. So now moving on to the structure. According to the structure, a sentence is classified into three, that is simple sentence, compound sentence and complex sentence. To understand the definition of these three, we need to understand the definition of independent clause and dependent clause. Now according to the structure, a sentence can be classified into three. So three classifications. Now what are they? First one is simple sentence. The second is compound. And the third one is complex. So simple, compound and complex. These are the three classifications of sentence according to their structure. Now what do you mean by simple sentence? Simple sentence, a sentence that is having one main clause. That means a verb and a subject and a verb. That is what your simple sentence means. For example, she is writing a letter. So simple sentence means what? It has one subject and one verb, together one main clause. So one main clause that gives complete sense. It has one subject and one verb. That is a simple sentence. That's how you identify a simple sentence. One subject and one verb, and it is a main clause and it gives a complete sense. That is a simple sentence. Now moving on to a compound sentence. Compound sentence is a sentence having two main clauses. So here you will be having two main clauses and they are joined by a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunction, joining word. So two main clauses, when they are joined using a coordinating conjunction, it becomes a compound sentence. So when you are having a compound sentence, you need to understand that the two sentences that are there can stand by their own. They are the main clause, but only thing is they are joined by a coordinating conjunction. Now what do you mean by coordinating conjunctions? You need it's better if you study this acronym fanboys. So it will be easy for you to know what are the coordinating conjunctions. F is for, A is and, N is nor, B is but, O is or, Y is at, and S is so. So FANBOYS. So these are the coordinating conjunctions. So two main clause joined by a coordinating conjunctions will give you a compound sentence. For example, she likes tea, but I like coffee. So she likes tea, I like coffee. This is the coordinating conjunction. But she likes tea can stand alone. I like coffee, it can stand alone. So these are two main clauses and they are joined with a but. So these type of sentences are called compound sentences. Two main clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction. Now the coordinating conjunctions is an easy way to learn this, that is the fan voice. So these are the things, these are the conjunctions that are used to join two main clauses and they are called the compound sentence. And coming on to the complex sentence, complex sentence has one main clause and at least one subordinate clause. So one independent clause plus at least one dependent clause. You can have one or two dependent clause there, but one main clause and at least one dependent clause. So independent clause is also known as main clause. I will be using both the terms so that you get familiar with it. So one independent clause or main clause plus at least one dependent clause together, joined with by a subordinate conjunction. Gives you the complex sentence. So what do you mean by complex sentence? One main clause plus at least one dependent clause joined by a subordinate conjunctions will give you a complex sentence. So at least one dependent clause should be there. You can have one or two, but one main clause, at least one dependent clause joined by a subordinate conjunction will be giving you a complex sentence. Some of the subordinate conjunctions are although, that, because, though, when, etc. And the example I can give, although he was wealthy, he was unhappy. So he was unhappy is the main clause. Although he was wealthy is the dependent clause. And here although is the subordinate conjunctions. So this is the example for a complex sentence. So we'll be having a look at what we did today. The sentence, phrase, clause, main clause or independent clause, subordinate clause or dependent clause. These are the terms that we studied today, and the classifications of sentence according to their structure. Classifications of sentence according to their structure. There are three classifications: simple, compound and complex. Simple sentence having one subject and verb, that is one main clause, it gives complete sense. Compound sentence, two main clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction, then it gives complete sense. Then complex sentence, one independent clause plus at least one dependent clause joined by a subordinating conjunctions. So this is what we did today. Thank you. I'll soon be back with the next video. Bye.